Welcome to part 3 of When Hurt Turns to Hate and Hopelessness. How many of you know that's not a great title to bring people in? You know, better title would be How to Make $1 Million in 10 Minutes Legally, or How to Have Perfect Children in 5 minutes. I mean, yeah, that would be the win-win. But the thing I love about Scripture is that it deals with the real world we live in instead of the imaginary one we would like to live in. So what we're going to do tonight, one of the things that's interesting, today I had an online conversation with somebody, and we were talking about travel, and she said, "Why do you travel so much?" And I told her, one of the things I do is a suicide prevention program. And then there was no immediate response, but then within a few minutes she says, "Hey, I lost my son 5 years ago to suicide." And so we began a conversation, and at the end of the conversation she said, "I am so glad I was able to talk to you today, because most people, when this subject comes up, they take a step back. They want to run and hide." She said, "It is so nice to have somebody to talk to who understands." And that's the goal when we're done tonight, is that you will be confident enough, not because of who you are, but because of Christ in you, but because of the information that you're going to have, to if this comes up, this topic, because it's real, and I get a show of hands real quick. How many of you have already had family member, friend, or somebody you know either make an attempt or they're not with us anymore because of suicide? Exactly. Pretty much everybody in the room. So this is not something that's rare or only happens in Los Angeles. This is all around us. But as a culture, we have decided to put our head in the sand and hope it goes away. But it doesn't. So we're going to look at it in a way where you'll be able to talk about it, you understand why it happens, but even almost more importantly, even all of us, just as regular human beings, there are 4 significant things we can do that literally save lives. Okay, so we're going to pray. We'll jump on board. You've got a pre-filled out handout, because I realized, especially yesterday, it's really hard to fill out a handout when it's on your hand. I don't know about your hand, but my hand is not conducive to making things legible. So, Father, we thank you for tonight. We thank you that you're not afraid to dive into the darkness, because you know when light and salt are there, it changes everything. So we thank you for that we can be your salt and your light wherever you send us, wherever we end up with you because of you. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. So, you're going to see as we go through here why we dealt with wounds and anger first. Because we've already realized that if somebody's been wounded and they don't take care of it, it impacts who they are, their capacity, how they look at life and all that stuff. Critical to know that ahead of time. We saw yesterday when we talked about anger that if somebody gets to silence and can't work things out, that's not a positive. You go all the way from, stress, a night's sleep that you lose, to eventually physical, problems that can manifest and make you look really, really sick. So we realize, okay, anger is a component as well. But what we're going to look at now is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. This is the part people see. This is the part people talk about. You have to know that the wounds and the anger are always backstories. Always. And if you can intervene at wounds or anger, you don't get to the triangle tip. But if you have to go from the triangle tip, you got to go backwards and at some point deal with the wounds and the anger, or it will be a reoccurring issue. It's like in anything, you have to go to the cause versus just the symptoms. You can medicate somebody into la-la land and eliminate the symptom. But does that change the cause? Not at all. It just creates a drug-addicted society that we live in today. Okay? So we're going to go, for causes. So scripturally, here's a real basic understanding of this. This is in 1 Peter 5. And Peter speaking, he says this: "Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you." Now that's a short statement, but how many of you know if we know that to be true for our own lives, that does change how we look at life? If we know, not just have heard or know the verse, but if we know he literally cares for us, how many of you know anxiety really doesn't have much of a place? If we're still kind of unsure about him, even knowing who we are, well then anxiety is going to go crazy. And then it leads into, "Be alert and of sober mind. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour." Now, here's the challenge with that. I've watched enough African documentaries. I've been to Africa. I've been on safari. You don't worry about the roaring lion. Think this through. Okay, a roaring lion comes in that door. Are you going to turn around and go, oh no, I'll run right towards him? How many of you know we're going to go the opposite direction, right? We're going out these side doors, back doors, whatever. And that's exactly what they want you to do. Because guess who's hiding behind all these other doors? The non-roaring lions. That's how they hunt. What the roaring lion does is they panic the group of antelopes or whoever it happens to be, panic them, and then usually it's the weak and vulnerable ones that respond first. They panic and they run away from the herd. When they were in the herd, they were safe. But as soon as they got singled out, as soon as they were alone, the roaring lion who caused it was not the one that chased them down and ate them. It was the quiet lions that were waiting for the panic. Because how many of you know when somebody panics, they do things that don't make any sense at all? It's just rationality's gone. I was a lifeguard for a number of summers, and we had to learn how to not die when you were trying to save people. Because a double drowning is a lot more common when somebody's actually trying to save someone. Because a person who is drowning panics, and they will do the stupidest things in the world to make themselves live, which will actually cause them and another person to drown. So we learned all kinds of kung fu techniques and literally all kinds of stuff just to be able to figure out how to get out of the possible situations we got into. Why? Because panic is a sudden, unreasoning, and overwhelming fear in the face of real or fantasy danger. Did you know you can be just as freaked out about something that's not real as you can about something that's real? And so that's where this scripture is so important, because it's not the roaring lion that panics you. It's where does it put you once you've panicked. So we need to recognize that. Now, there's some other things on here that'll make sense when we come back to them. So we're going to start with a little illustration on the top. And how many of you know that kind of looks like Egyptian hieroglyphics right now? Yeah, it looks like, well, this is really interesting. So here's what we got. I will explain to you what each of these things mean, and then we'll kind of walk through, and I'll give you a real-life example of somebody we worked with. Like I said, I've been the direct intervention guy in over 40 suicide attempts initially. I have been an intervention guy in hundreds of suicidal people since, because of this kind of a program that we do in the public schools and all kinds of different locations, where people come up and say, hey, I was going to kill myself this weekend. What do I do now instead? Where they say, hey, I'm really concerned about my sister. We had one little gal, 12 years old, comes and says, hey, here's the deal. I met this guy online. He lives in Denver. I live in Olympia. I'm the only person keeping him alive. What do I do? How many of you know when you're 12, you can't do that? She's trying. So again, all these things that have happened since that initial 40 keeps this in the forefront. I'll be in public schools again here in a few more weeks. And I know things are going to happen just because we're there. So here's box number one. A wall. How many of you got that one? We good with that? Wall represents an obstacle or challenge. Okay? Stick figure, not an artist. A human being. Male, female, doesn't matter at this point. Down the bottom corner, a carnivorous Pac-Man. So how many of you have ever played a video game with a Pac-Man? Yeah, and what does that little dude do? He chases you across the screen, doesn't he? He's the terrorizer. Okay? Well, we know who he is. He's got a name. But when you're talking to anybody, you can talk about a carnivorous Pac-Man. It makes perfect sense. He represents the fears that people have. And as long as you're overcoming your obstacles and your challenges, he's about soccer ball size. No big deal. Kick him out of the way. Just keep going. And at a certain point, people recognize you have to try more than once to get past an obstacle. So I watched today, everybody successfully walked in this room. Amazing. Way to go, folks. Did you know the average kid falls down 300 times before they learn how to walk? So what does that mean? How many times do they have to get up? 300 times. And yet we kind of get this thing in our heads that the older we get, it gets easier. And it doesn't. It doesn't get easier. We have to recognize it's going to take a while to get past obstacles and challenges, okay? Now, we start to line this out. Now kind of think this through a minute. What happens if somebody is already wounded from things in the past they haven't dealt with? Do you see how that's going to make a big difference in how they respond here? Yeah, instead of being able to try 10 times, every time they don't get past an obstacle or a challenge, well, their capacity keeps dropping. So let's say somebody doesn't get past this first one. Now you got your next obstacle. There's always a new obstacle, always a new challenge. And now maybe they only got the motivation or energy or gumption to go 6 times. Meanwhile, carnivorous Pac-Man's getting bigger. So now he's about the size of a beach ball. Harder to ignore, harder to say, hey, no big deal. Let's just say they don't get past that one. Now the carnivorous Pac-Man's the size of a beanbag chair. Really hard to ignore, really hard to say, hey, no big deal. They still look the same on the outside, but look what their capacity's down to. We're down to a 3. And let's just say they don't get past that one. Well, boom, down here. Now, they got 2 tries left in them. They finally start to look a little different. But this is the challenge. This top part can take weeks, months, years. This second part can take days. Which is why it's not uncommon for somebody in a work setting on Monday to go, hey, where's Fred? And they go, oh, you didn't hear? No, Fred took his life over the weekend. And everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. Like he seemed fine on Friday. Yeah, he did. But all these other things had already taken place. He was already wounded and bleeding out. He was angry but didn't know what to do with it. And then a few things happened over the weekend, just pushed him over the edge. Same thing in a school setting. Same kind of response. Hey, where's Josiah? Well, and then the story comes out and they go, but he was here on Friday. He seemed okay. Yeah, because he was up here. And that's the challenge, is that you don't get a lot of advance warning when somebody goes from they look fine to something could happen. So it's one of those deals, how many of you for some things we can say, oh, I'll get to that later. That's okay for some things. It's not okay for this. There's a short window of opportunity to dive in at this point. How many of you can see that the window of opportunity is a lot bigger if you dive in at wounds? If you dive in at anger? If you dive in there, then you don't have to worry about this really short window here. But again, now that you at least have a verbiage for anger and wounds, hopefully, we can wade into that world. So we're up here now. They don't get past that one. Okay, boom. Now they finally start to look a little different, but now they've only got 2 tries left in them, which means it can evaporate quickly. And of course here, 1 try, they're going to look really different. And each time the carnivorous Pac-Man, it's just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we know that phrase, in between a rock and a hard spot. This is the ultimate rock and the ultimate hard spot. And here's the thing we've learned, working with all the different people we've worked with. Every one of these challenges or obstacles always has an answer. Always. It's just as this person doesn't know what they are. Remember the lion? He wants to get him singled out from the pack. Why? Because in the pack is safety. When it's a we versus a me, there's safety in that. There's wisdom that we don't have because there's people around us that have it. That's why it's so critical that people don't isolate themselves, which is one of the symptoms when we look at that, is that they have a tendency. It's so easy when you don't feel good, when you feel like you need the help the most, is when you're least likely to ask for it. Why we do that, I don't know. I just know we do that. When we should be asking for help, when we should be knocking, when we should be talking to people and not just YouTube and Google, but when we should be talking to people, we just back off. And I don't know if it's pride or what, but at some point we got to get good at being able to ask for help, give help, see what we don't want to see, and respond. So this kind of sets this up. So I'm going to give you a real life example of a gal we worked with. So right here, the beginning of this little panel, she's a junior in high school. She's 17, straight A student, top 10 student, and she has met the man of her dreams over the summer. So how many of you know as that school year begins, she's feeling pretty good? She's got the guy who, they're talking marriage, all this kind of stuff. She's a straight A student, so she's got scholarship opportunities coming up. She's top 10, so all her friends are cool, smart kids. I mean, it's just looking really good till about November. And in November, he dumped her. And there was nothing she could do to get him back. Now, in the course of being dumped, she missed some school. What happens to your straight A's when you start missing school? Start going down. And if you're a top 10 kid in a lot of high schools, how many of you know that means you do have a 4.0 or higher? There is no 3.2 or no, it's 4.0 or higher. So, boom, the guy's gone, and then all of a sudden her grades are slipping, and for her, that was like her identity. You know, everybody in this room, if we had a chance to talk, you know, and we said, hey, so like, what are you all about? And somebody would say, oh, you know, I'm a metal shop. Oh, this is my hobby. Oh, I love my kids, my grand, you know, we would all have something that we identify with. Well, for her, it was grades. And because of that, again, miss a little bit more school. Grades keep dropping. Now, when your grades drop, do they give you a probation period in the top 10? No, you're gone. Soon as she dropped from whatever level it was, she got replaced. And that was her group of friends. She'd been the top 10 kid ever since she was a freshman. So freshman, sophomore, part of her junior year, these are her friends. They're her people. So in pretty rapid succession, she lost the guy, the grades, and the top 10 group of friends. And in that particular school, the way they ran, if you missed a certain amount of days, you did not get credit for the semester. So now she isn't even going to graduate with her friends. She went from top 10 kids straight A to not even going to graduate in about a month and a half. And from that point on, any little thing that would happen in her life, she made about 6 really serious attempts before she finally kind of leveled out a little bit and started to let us help. Because we kind of had to really work with her to get her to open up and let us help. So one by one, we started to go backwards. So first it was, hey, you know, we know you're out of school. We know you're not going to graduate the normal way. Let's get you a GED. And she's like, no, that's only for stupid people. So, no, that's for people where it didn't work the first time. So finally got her GED. Well, if you got a GED, how many of you know you can go to community college? Yep, so she went to community college. She's a bright kid. She got good grades. She did fine. So now, you know, she's back there. And initially she was concerned, well, what are people going to say? What about if they ask me about my GPA in high school? Nobody cares. You're on the campus, right? So that she's backtracking, finishes that, goes to a 4-year, gets there, meets a guy, gets married. So everything that she thought was hopeless had an answer. Everything. And it didn't matter all the different scenarios we've worked with, all the different kids, students, adults, people that we've been involved with, there's always answers. It's just as they don't know what they are. So now think this through. This was her world. So for her, what were her issues? What were, let's say, 4 of the things that got her to the point of taking her own life? What were her 4 things? Go ahead and you tell me. Okay, a little bit louder. Dumb boy, yes. And actually, if I had known she was going to hook up with him, I would have told her he was a dumb boy. But she didn't ask, okay? You know, they don't always ask my opinion, right? But anyway, yeah, the guy, okay? Because again, they tend to be all in, okay? And yesterday we talked about how a lot of times in relationships, it's marriage minus the ring, and it wasn't their case. So when it was breakup, it was divorce minus the paperwork. It was harsh on her, okay? So definitely the guy. What would have been another one of her issues? Yeah, I think I heard grades, okay? Totally true. Maybe a couple more. Go for it. Yeah, she's alone, okay? Because that's the one thing. How many of you know when people couple up, what happens to all their other friends? They fade away, don't they? Yeah, so she'd coupled up, you know, at the beginning of the summer, so it's been 4 months with this guy, almost 5, and then now they're gone. And especially with the top 10 kids, yeah, she was alone. Okay? Anything else you can see for her? So we got grades, the guy, alone. Oh, go for it. I hear it. So what was it? A little louder. Oh, well, here's part of her backstory. Okay, remember the wounds? Okay, when she was young, her mom got a divorce. So wound number 1. Wound number 2, mom marries a guy who has an older son, stepbrother. who molests her for 2 years before mom finds out. Remember I said there were wounds? Because you look at this girl, I mean, she was cute, she was smart, I mean, she had a lot going for her, but she'd been bleeding since she was 4 years old. She still lived in the same house where all this happened. Okay? So she was bleeding from the inside out. So there's a lot of backstory going on, which is why you have to know that kind of stuff. Because when you realize it didn't matter what she looked like, but who was she? Well, she was a wounded kid, deeply wounded. Okay? And then we'll throw in graduation. Okay? So here's part of the challenge with fears. Does anybody have the same fears? No. How many of you stressed grades? Okay, how many of you didn't? Okay? I can't spell. Okay, my wife will verify it. And I grew up way pre-computer, spell check and all that kind of stuff. I would write like an English paper, and at the bottom it would say, good idea, nice storyline. But how many of you know when there's 87 little red marks on there, you don't get good grades? Okay, it just doesn't happen, right? And so I worked as hard as I could, and in high school I graduated with a B average. I went to college, I graduated with a B average, but in college I have 16 A's in PE classes or my sport. Okay, that's how I got a 3.0 in college, because those C's and that 1D were deserved. Okay, I just can't do it. I learned to do my best, but not to stress. And how many of you, there's a big difference? Yeah, but for her, I mean, this was like killing her. I remember talking to a gal one time. I had to work with her for a while. She's a sophomore in college, and she was going to get her first B ever in her life, and she was having panic attacks. How many of you would have been dancing to get that B? Exactly, okay? So the challenge with fears is you can't, blow them off. You can't belittle them. If it's real to them, and again, fear is not, I have several acronyms for fear. Fear is false evidence appearing real. That's one of the fears. The other one is forgetting every available resource. That's fear. There is no founding for it. How many of you know the Bible has do not be afraid in it hundreds of times? Hundreds of times. For good reason. You don't make good decisions when you're afraid. So this is kind of the scenario. Now, here's that challenge. So we get to terrorize everybody. So hi, neighbor.
My turn now.
Yeah, you're a neighbor. Hi, neighbor. I terrorized him yesterday, so I'll terrorize you tonight. So if you're my neighbor, and early in the morning, we get up, both headed out the door, I look over the fence, I go, hey, you look really tired. And you go, oh, yeah, late last night, we had a water leak, no problem. Next day, I go, dude, you look really tired. He goes, yeah, that water leak came back again, didn't have time for breakfast. Okay, no problem. Third day, I look over the fence and go, hey, you look suicidal. Can I say that? No. See, that's the cultural challenge we face, is that how do you talk about it? So I'm not going to say, hey, do you look suicidal? But what I will say is, hey, when you get home from work, give me a holler. I'll come over and let's see if we can really get this plumbing thing figured out.
How did you know?
We know in part and we prophesy in part, okay?
It's a main line.
There you go, okay? So I come over and we do the plumbing thing and we get it figured out, and then I sit down and I draw this. And I say, where are you at on this? He goes, whoa. Yeah, I'm probably right here. I go, how come? He says, well, there's stuff going on in work right now, and I may get laid off. My wife and I, this whole plumbing thing, I mean, it just got out of hand. She's so mad at me, I can't believe it. And right now, if I lose my job, we're barely making it, I mean, we may lose the house. Now, how many of you know those are real things? But the way we live life, we don't usually sit down long enough to diagnose what's going on. We just know that we don't feel good. Because how many of you have ever not felt good and you don't even really know why? Because you haven't sat down to figure it out.
You said last night, it's stress.
That's right, it's stress. And it's all these different contributors, right? So then I say, one, I can help him with the plumbing thing. But then I go, wait a minute, don't you work at McKinney's or whatever? And he goes, yeah. I said, look, I know the boss. He says, you're kidding me. I go, no, we go way back. I said, let me talk to him and see if you're on that short list. He goes, well, that'd help. But how many of you know that conversation would never happen if we didn't do this? So I've drawn this on the side of my truck in Lowe's parking lot. I met some gal for a Craigslist thing, and she goes, so how come you can meet me at like 10 o'clock in the morning? And I go, well, I kind of work out of my house, kind of like a consultant type thing. She goes, oh, really? Well, what do you do? And I told her about the suicide prevention thing. She goes, oh, really? Boom. I did the whole thing on the side of my nicely dirty white truck. Don't ever give anybody a bad time about a dirty truck, okay? It may have a distinct purpose, okay? So don't go down that road with somebody. Let them have a dirty truck. So one day I did it for her. I was at a birthday party one time in Spain after a language school I was doing. And they said, hey, what do you do? I told him. And he goes, oh, you need to talk to her. This is a birthday girl. So I go up to her and I explain this whole thing, because I can do it in Spanish. And she gets done and she goes, she's crying. She goes, this is the best birthday present I got today. I'm on an airplane one time. Aisle seat, teenage girl, mom's on the window. We take off. It's from here to Miami, and then I'm going to Poland. So we take off. I say, hey, where are you guys going? And the mom's all, oh, we're going to Disney World. We're going to be there for a week. We're in the resort. And she's just going on and on and on and on. Meanwhile, teenage daughter, she's not doing that. She's just sitting there, which I kind of go, okay, that's kind of normal. Because those of you that have teenagers know how many, if you like go to a mall or something, what do your teenagers do as soon as they have the chance? Yeah, they go somewhere else, a different direction. We'll meet back here in an hour or whatever, right? It's just no, right? So the fact that she has to sit next to her mom for 6 hours on an airplane, I'm not surprised that she's not excited. But then the mom says, well, where are you going? What do you do? And I said, well, I'm going to Poland. And she goes, what? I said, yeah, I do a suicide prevention thing there. She goes, really? And then she mouths the words and looks down at her daughter and goes, she's suicidal. So I pull out the barf bag. And I say, here's what I do when I'm in Poland. And I draw this on the barf bag. And then I go through several different examples, the gal we talked about, a couple other different ones. And it was really kind of cool because the gal, when she got on the plane, how many of you know most people, if you're going to go spend a week at Disney World, you would be crazy excited about it. You'd just be like, whoa, right? Not her. All she could think about was this stuff. I don't know what they were. She never told me. But whatever her issues were more overwhelming to her than the fact that she was getting to go to Disney World for a week. Wow. So again, she never told me what they were, but I kept talking about, hey, this is how we dealt with it, and here's how we helped this person and that person. And it was kind of cool, because after about an hour, she kind of morphed from, I don't want to be on this airplane, all I can think about is stuff. And all of a sudden she goes, there's this one ride. And all of a sudden she started to talk about Disney World. Because at some point it clicked for her that she didn't have to worry about this stuff. That she could get answers somewhere from somebody, and that there was hope. Because see, that's the thing about when hurt turns to hate and hopelessness. How many of you know when it's hopeless, we give up? We just give up. I've been to a lot of sporting events in my life, and I've done a lot of sports. How many of you know there's a lot of people that leave before the game is over? Why? Because they've given up hope that their team can win. I've learned that it doesn't work that way. I've learned, and I've seen it. I've been a part of it. Where you were so far behind, there's no hope you can catch up. Oh, yeah, you can. It ain't over till it's over. And as long as you have it ain't over till it's over attitude, you'll get to see some pretty amazing stuff happen. But when you don't have any hope, you give up. And that's exactly where this girl was. She had given up hope. So much so that Disney World wasn't enough to pull her out of it. So that's the challenge for us. Just being able to talk to people and walk them through this and talk about, hey, there's always solutions. And you don't even have to be the one who has all the solutions. As long as you know, and you should know this, there are always solutions. There are people that know, our God in heaven knows, there are always solutions. So this gives us that first piece that's so important, because how many of you, just as we've walked through this, how many of you already know more than you knew before you came in here? You're kind of like going, okay, this kind of makes sense. And how many of you know this is not an artistic creation here? How many of you could at least duplicate it, if not make it better? Oh yeah, I've seen some amazing drawings from students who, they have ivy on the bricks, and the Carnivorous Pac-Man looks really scary, and it's a full meal deal, but this is the way you start to talk about it. And then on the back here, there's two different lists. I'm in public schools regularly, so here's two lists. We had the one girl example, where it was the grades, the guy, those specific things. So these are two different lists from one of the high schools where I speak regularly of what else was on the list. Because what I do when I'm in the schools, I'll ask the students, I'll say, hey, what were these girls' issues? And they identify them, and we go, great, okay. Now I say, think about people you know or people your age, what else would be on the list? And what you've got right there is what high school students have said to me within about the last year. That's what's on their list. And this challenging thing is, if you look through some of these things, you're kind of going like, really? It's that big of a deal? Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I've had middle school girls say, if I'm not a size 6, if I weighed over 110 pounds, if I had a unibrow. I had a girl tell me once she'd kill herself if she had a unibrow. How many of you know there's such a thing called tweezers? I don't know if she didn't know that or not, but you don't have to have a unibrow. You know what I mean? It's just like, again, they just don't know. And so all these different issues, we can be very, very, very fragile sometimes. And especially when you throw in the wound factor from the past and the anger reality that you get stuck in silence and you don't solve anything, you can be really beat up no matter how good you look on the outside. And if you'll think about it, most people that make an attempt on their own lives have some level of success. Did you know you don't have suicide issues in homeless populations? They don't kill themselves. They have figured out a way to cope. They figured out a way to get by. And at least half of them are good with that. They can do it. They don't have, but it's people who've had some level of success, who can look good on the outside, dying on the inside. They're the ones that end up making attempts. So don't be ever surprised if it revealed to you by something they say or something you observe that somebody you might know would be suicidal. Don't ever be surprised of the who, because it literally could be anybody. In our community, I did a after the fact for a school because one of the pastor's wives had hung herself. And all the kids went to that Christian school. I did another one in our area for a church where one of the young youth volunteers, teenager, 19 years old, had been on the worship team, hung himself. It happens. Okay, it happens. So we got to be ready to dive into the whoever with the whatever issues are going on. Now, there's some reasons why all this takes place, especially in the younger person world. It's not just young people. There's a ton of age brackets where it increases, but for my world, it's the young people. So down here's a cute little chart. And what you've got is you begin your life based on emotions. Okay, I asked yesterday about how many people still did babysitting. So how many of you do the babysitting thing? I'll ask again. And then I'll ask, what kind of things do little kids get emotional about? Yeah, there we go, front row. Everything. Food, sleep, what you watch, what you don't watch. Mommy's here, mommy's not here. They came back, I didn't want them to come back. I mean, they just get they're an emotional package with two legs. Okay? And until you reach a certain stage, your life is based highly on emotions. At a certain point, there's a crossover and you base your life on experience. Now, I've already given you the answer of when that happens. Age 25. Okay, so for those of you that are over 25, what magical thing happened to your car insurance when you turned 25? It dropped. Were you necessarily a better driver? Statistically, you were. We got an insurance man right in the front row. Okay, that's the way it works. They have known for decades that at 25, somehow, they became better drivers. They didn't know why. Now they know. Guess when you're finally fully mentally and emotionally developed? 25. And yet we as a culture have pushed adulthood younger and younger and younger. When I was in high school, you weren't considered an adult till you're 21. Changed after I got out of high school because of Vietnam War. Slogan was old enough to die, old enough to vote. So you could get drafted at 18, shipped over to Nam, come home in a box, and you didn't get to vote about any of it. So they changed it. But did that make everybody 3 years more mature suddenly? No. Okay? So that's 18 is the legal age when people go, oh, you're an adult now. No, you're not. You're 18. Okay? And then what we've kind of done as a culture is like, well, okay, well, at 18, you're legally an adult. So at 16, when you're driving and we're not going to be around, adults often say, hey, you got to start making adult decisions now because I'm not going to be there to make them for you. Well, we already made a mistake at 18. How many of you know it's an even bigger mistake at 16? And I have a ton of 14-year-olds tell me, oh, yeah, my folks are already telling me that. They're saying, hey, in 2 years, you're going to be driving. I'm not going to be there, so you got to start making adult decisions now. Here's the deal. They can make a good decision, and they don't even know it's a good decision because they can't connect the dots. Mentally, emotionally, they don't have that capacity. They make a good decision, they don't know if it's a good one or not. They make a bad one, they don't know if it's a good, bad one or not. They're just not fully mentally, emotionally, physically developed yet. So 25 is the great crossover line. But let's say you live over here in the pre-25 age bracket. You're 14. You have problems. Who do you talk to? Your friends. They're 14 just like you. They understand you. What are all the advice they give you based on? Emotions. I haven't run into a 15-year-old kid yet who hasn't gotten bad advice from a good friend. Sometimes really bad advice. Good intentioned advice. It wasn't evil intent. It's the best shot they had. But that was it. And that's the challenge over here. The good advice is on the other side of the line. So I lost one of my college roommates right out of college. So I graduated at 22, took an extra year. Most of my buddies were 21 when they got out. One of them worked up in Seattle, one of them worked down in Shelton. The one in Shelton called my buddy up in Seattle one night and says, hey, all this stuff is going on. This isn't working out the way I thought it was. I don't really know what to do with it all. And my buddy up in Seattle said one of the worst things you can say to somebody who's depressed, well, just do whatever you got to do. He gave him permission to just do whatever. And so that night he shot himself. I lost one of my college roommates right out of college. If he had talked to somebody on the other side of the line, I know he would have got better advice. I know he would have. But he didn't. Because after all, he was an adult. And after all, so was his buddy. But he didn't get good advice. So the challenge is that, one, for those of us on the 25 plus side, we got to get really good at listening. Because how many of you know it's really easy to shut them down if they're on that other side of the 25? Real easy. One of the reasons why we talk about a common language. Why? So we can understand each other. Because if you can understand each other, you can talk about this stuff. You can listen at least as much as you do before you say anything. You know, it is so critical to have both sides of that 25 working together. Because the challenges of youth never been any bigger than they are right now. I mean, it just gets more and more complicated all the time. They have to have people on this side of the line, not just YouTube, not just Google, not just AI. They got to have real live flesh and blood people on this side that they can talk to. So with all that going on, here's some of the warning signs. And there can be others, but these ones are almost, at least a few of them are almost always the case. First one's called cleaning house. Okay, now it will come as a shock to you. How many of you parents would be shocked if your kid actually cleaned up their room voluntarily? Yeah, that would not be the norm, right? So here's what cleaning house is. They will actually give away all their prized items. When you get old, like my wife and I, we have a will. And the will stipulates, here's what happens to the house and the assets and all that stuff. It's all written down. Okay, when you're younger, you physically take care of it yourself. You give away all your cool stuff. Now, is that normal to give away all your cool stuff? No. but the people receiving it don't recognize that. They're just pumped to get it. You know, if a kid's a hunter and he's got a nice rifle and a bunch of camo and all that kind of stuff, if he gives those to his friend's going to go, "Oh, dude, thank you." Not, "Oh, dude, are you suicidal?" You know, and so we worked with a guy up in Tacoma. He had a young man. He'd made an attempt on his life. He was in the hospital. He was going to live. But they decided, hey, we need to go to the home and see if he left a suicide note. So we have some understanding and background to help him. They get to his room. You know, they meet the parents. They go up to his room. They open the door. And there is nothing left in his room except the furniture. He'd given away all his clothing, music, everything he owned was gone. And nobody noticed. Nobody. Parents didn't notice. Friends didn't notice. He'd given away everything, cleaning house. And that's a real common one that people just don't get. Okay, so you've got cleaning house. Number 2, if there's a divorce. Now, my folks waited till I was out of the house before they got a divorce. But even then, that was tough. You know, and I already know, just because I've talked to a number of you, a lot of you guys have lived through a divorce, either as a kid or as an adult. It's tough. And I always tell people, divorce is the gift that keeps on giving. It's not like an event that's over. How many of you know it just keeps going? My folks get a divorce, so raising our kids, we had to have 3 Christmases. Why? Because my mom and my dad couldn't be in the same room at the same time. So we had to have 3 Christmases. And then for our kids, we had to explain, how come Grandma and Grandpa don't live together? I mean, you know, it just keeps going, right? And so it's a challenge. And it's not only a divorce of the parents, but if students have had a significant relationship in their eyes, that's divorce too. Remember, marriage minus the ring, divorce minus the paperwork. So those are significant warning signs. Another one is if they roll into the I don't care mode. Now, how many of you teenagers, you get to answer this one. How many of you on a hot day will take 2 or 3 showers a day sometimes? Anybody in that 2 or 3 showers a day sometimes? We got a no. We got any yeses? Or we got all no? We got some yes. See, guys, you're not dating yet. When you're dating, it'll be a yes, okay? So he's sitting there, of course, he has to smell good, right? So real common. So girlfriend, let's just say he goes 3 or 4 days without a shower. That's a warning sign. Because at that point, he don't care, okay? See, that's what it rolls down to, is that their hygiene stops, they quit changing their clothes, you know, they gave up. No hope. So that's a warning sign. How many of you know we would have a tendency just to be upset with them? Dude, you stink. Why don't you take a shower? Well, yeah, that's true. But why? What's the cause? So again, that's a warning sign. This one always surprises people. If all of a sudden somebody becomes sexually active when they have not been before. So this one girl we were working with, I started talking to her this one time and I said, so how come you went from one guy forever to any guy that will look at you? And she said, for 15 minutes I can pretend that I'm loved. How many of you know that's hopeless with capital letters? So again, a warning sign that we're not going to see. We're going to miss that, but that's a warning sign. If they end up then running into the drug and alcohol world, and we'll talk about that in a second, 80% of all suicide attempts happen under the influence of drugs or alcohol. So we'll go ahead and jump to this, and I'll show you why. I need a volunteer, but it has to be somebody who has perfect vision. Does anybody have perfect, and not with glasses? So you have perfect vision? Okay, come on down. Okay, so go ahead and stand right here. Turn around and look at everybody. Okay, take one good last look at everybody. Because at the count of 3, I'm going to make them all disappear. Yeah, I'm really good at this. And there'll be no body damage to you. Okay, so don't worry about that. I'm not going to pop your eyes out. Okay? Good. Take a deep breath. Just relax. Now look. Ready? No, look at them, not me. Ready? 1, 2. Put these on. 3. Yeah. So, what just happened here? Yeah, okay. So here's what he sees. What he sees with the glasses is what I see without them. Is it a good thing I wear glasses when I drive? Yeah. Okay, so literally right now, all of you are just fuzzy blobs of varying colors. Okay, can you even tell if they're guys or gals? No. So let's just say they're kind of upset that we can't even tell if they're a guy or a gal. If they had a 6-inch knife, could you see it? No. Okay, so let's say they go a little crazy on us, so they come up here with a 6-inch knife. Can you see it? No. Okay, you tell me when this is clear, okay? Right there. Are we in trouble? Yeah. Okay, see, here's the deal. When people get involved in drugs or alcohol, do their problems disappear? No. Can they see? No, you volunteered. I saw that. Okay. Usually there's no permanent brain damage, so you should be okay. Okay. But, yeah, usually. I can't guarantee anything, okay? But your problems don't disappear, but what happens is you're drunk, you're high, you're like, whoa, right? But then all of a sudden it becomes clear where? Right there. And people panic, and they do things they would never do sober. 80% of all suicide attempts, 80% of crime, first crime, 80% of unwanted sexual activity happens under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Why? Because you can't see what's going on. It's basic. Now here's where it gets really scary. How old are you right now? 10. Don't do this. But if he got involved in the drug and alcohol world now at 10, what would it be like to wear those for a week? Yeah. How would you do in school? Bad. Okay. How about like with your friends? Could you even tell like if they were upset with you or anything? No. You stop maturing. So he's 10 now. He can have 15 more birthdays. He'll be 25. But will he cross that line from emotion-based to experience-based? No. Because he hadn't had any experience for 15 years. I remember talking to a guy at Thurston County one time, one of the jails, and he said, hey, do you got a brother named this? I go, yeah. And I said, hey, do you know him? Oh, we went to high school together. I said, you still in contact? He goes, no, I dropped out my freshman year. I said, okay, so what was going on? He said, oh, drugs and alcohol, crime, all that stuff. I said, okay. So how long have you been sober since? He goes, 6 weeks. And I go, 6 weeks this time? He goes, no, 6 weeks total. So the guy was biologically about 45. He looked 65, but he had the capacity of a 15-year-old. So every job, short-lived, got fired. Every relationship, short-lived, didn't work. I mean, if I had to live life like this, first challenge would be, Chris, can you drive the car home? Because I couldn't see. And then all the way home, could I enjoy anything I would see? No, nothing. Now, would I even know if she was upset about me, about being so stupid I got drunk right before going to drive home? I wouldn't even know. See, so that's the other thing about keeping somebody sober. Not only can you prevent a suicide attempt, but what you also do is you prevent that kind of a lifestyle. I'm the traveling guy. I'm the outside guy. When I'm in the schools, I'm the expert, okay? But what I say doesn't mean near as much as what the 15-year-old says to another 15-year-old. So instead of drunk or high as a response to pain or challenge or failure, no, let's go shoot hoops, dude. Let's do some online gaming or do anything but go down the drug or alcohol world. Okay? So you're ready to come back to the real world? Me too. Okay, can we make the exchange? Okay, can you give me, because I can't see him real well. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, why don't you guys watch him carefully to see if he can navigate his way back. Are you good? He's doing good. Good. Okay. So that's why the drug and alcohol is such a big deal, because that's 80% statistically. Again, people who do things drunk or high, they would never do sober. Now, here's where, again, if we don't pay attention, there's a thing called death talk. And I've had some interesting conversations over the years with people, but they start asking odd questions. They say things like, so what do you think it'd be like to die fast? Well, what do you think it'd be like to die slow? That's not normal conversation, okay? But what they're doing with death talk or death art is they're kind of coming up with a plan. And they'll throw some stuff out just to kind of, and they'll say stuff like, so well, that one bridge, that's pretty high, man. If you went off that, there's no way you could live. Or, there's that one road out so-and-so. If you went down that at 90, there's no way you can make that corner at the end. That's all death talk. And what they're in the process of doing is coming up with a plan. But it's not necessarily super specific, but they're laying all these clues out. And they'll say things about that, or they say, you know what? My mom's got enough medicine in the cabinet to kill 20 people. That's a plan. Or if they say, I know where my dad keeps his gun and I know how to get the ammo. That's a plan. They are verbalizing plans. And so that's the challenge with that, is that if we're not listening for that, we'll just think, oh yeah, whatever. No. It's not a whatever. And then the last one is, and this is again why we don't seek help when we need it most, but is when they start to push back. So like at school on Friday, you'll say, hey, you want to come to the house on Saturday? We're going to do whatever that you really like to do. And the student says, nah, I just want to be alone this weekend. That's a warning sign, especially if some of these other things have already happened. That's a warning sign. Or if you're used to texting, I've talked to plenty of teenagers, and I'll say, hey, how much time do you give them before you expect a text back? And they go, 5 seconds, minute. I go, what happens if it's 2 hours? Well, then they're mad at me. They don't like me anymore. I said, no, what if they're just trying to push you away? And they want to be alone and isolated. Remember, roaring lion, what's it try to do? Isolate, make them vulnerable, get them all by themselves. So that's a list of the warning signs. Fortunately, you don't have to be like a super trained professional. I mean, I ended up in this without choice. I just got thrown in the mix. But all the students that we work with are still alive today. Okay? Just because of these basic, simple things and the fact that God the Father was a part of what we were doing, and we could offer that as a part of that hope. But that's all real stuff. So here's the 4 things any of us can do to help. So number 1, we already talked about it. Keep them sober. Don't go down that, hey, just get a little loosey-goosey and you'll feel better about it and we'll worry about it tomorrow. No, they may not wake up the next day. Because under influence, they will try something that they wouldn't normally try. Okay, so that's huge. Keep them sober. Number 2, sorrow is a big deal. You had a funeral on Saturday. Jesus said in Matthew 5, blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. As a culture, we don't mourn well. How many of you have lost somebody and they didn't even have a funeral? Yeah, they just, well, we're going to cremate him and go sprinkle the ashes on the river or up in a mountain or whatever. Well, that's fine, but that means we don't get a chance to mourn. Because how many of you know at a funeral you can cry and nobody's going to think twice about it? Okay, how many of you, there are very few other places where we can get away with that? It's just awkward for us as a culture. We don't deal well. And that reality of sorrow is that builds up just like anger does if we don't process it. And the grief cycle is something that's an annual event. If you lose somebody, let's say Christmas Day, how many of you know the next Christmas is going to be impacted? As well 2 years later, as well 3 years later. My wife lost her dad in 1986. So somebody do the math on that. How long ago was that? Yeah, 36, almost 37 years. Okay? Well, her dad's birthday was in June on Flag Day. There's this day called Flag Day, and a lot of times where we live, the cemetery, they put all these flags out. It's really decorative on a sunny day, but it's really hard on my wife. Why? Because it reminds her of her dad, who's not there anymore. He's a great guy. Okay, we were married for about 8 years before he passed, so I know he's a great guy. Is she going to forget she had a dad? Never. She misses him on Flag Day. When all our kids got married, she wished he was there. See what I mean? And we're not good at sorrow. So if you're the friend who's got somebody who's had a loss like that, be the one that lets them just fall apart. Don't tell them to move on. Don't tell them to get over it. Don't tell them to get past it. No, let them fall apart. Blessed are those who mourn, for they'll be comforted. You know, we've heard that expression, it's a good cry. It's real. It's a real thing. Okay? And yet it's a challenge because as a culture, we don't do well. Now, I've been in plenty of cultures. In the Dominican Republic, if somebody dies, you know it. Okay? The first time I saw it, I was kind of like, whoa. So what they do down there, and I've seen it, somebody passes away, they will put them in a coffin and parade the coffin throughout the town so that everybody knows so-and-so died. And then they know that the family's in mourning and that everybody who knew that person gets a chance to fall apart. First time I saw it, I was not comfortable. Okay? All I could imagine was they were going to trip and drop the coffin, and whoever it was just going to come popping out. That's all I could think of. Okay, but the reality is the community mourned. The community understood so-and-so just lost somebody significant. See, so again, blessed are those who mourn. We can be that person. Okay? Take them seriously. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but if anybody even hints, take them seriously. Start to do something. And if they were just joking around, they'll put the brakes on. Okay? I did this for a Kiwanis group one time in Salmon, Idaho. Afterwards, the guy came up to me. He said, man, I wish you'd been here earlier. I said, how come? Well, we had a guy in town, owned a hardware store. Somebody came into the store and said, hey, I need to buy 6 feet of rope. And I said, why? The owner said, why? So the guy goes, well, I want to hang myself. And the store owner goes, dude, you can't do it 6 feet. You need at least 12. And he sold him 12 feet of rope, and the guy hung himself. So not only have you lost somebody, but how many of you know that store owner is going to be messed up for the rest of his life? My friend who gave the bad advice to our roommate 42 years ago now, he has been messed up ever since. He's never recovered. Okay? That weight, that guilt. The gal I talked to today, 5 years ago, she lost her son. She said, I still feel guilty. That somehow I should have known, that I should have done something. I mean, that's a tough one. You know, so to be able to take them seriously, if they even just hint, if you just think for a minute that's the road they're going down, dive in. They'll let you know if they're not. But at least you know you did what you could do. And then this last one is the most important one. Create a safety net. As much as I know and as many times as I've been involved, you know what? Right now, if somebody's trying to get a hold of me, I don't have my phone with me. Sound's not on. I'm not going to hear it. Sooner or later, I go to sleep at night. I don't have my cell phone by my bed. It's downstairs at the charging station. See what I mean? No one person can keep somebody alive. So one of the most important things to be able to do is to initiate help for whoever it is that you're concerned about. And I've learned a few things. How many of you ever had somebody start a conversation with you like this? They say, hey, I've got something to tell you, but promise not to tell anyone. And I've learned that I say this, I can't make that promise. If I need to talk to somebody to get you help, I will do that. Because how many of you know if you say, oh no, I won't tell anybody, then what happens when they download this monster on you? You have to break trust to get them the help they need. That doesn't work well. You have to be able to say, no, I can't make that promise. If I need to talk to somebody else to get you help, that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so that's how it starts. Now, who could potentially be in a safety net? How many of you know family could be in a safety net? Yeah, family, friends, and depending on your situation, family could be a big deal. I mean, you could have aunts, uncles, grandmas, you could have all kinds. Or, unfortunately, for a lot of people, there's hardly anybody. Okay, there might be one. Okay, so family, friends. If they're involved in a school setting, school counselors. I was on a first-name basis with school counselors when I was a youth pastor. Because I could call the school on Monday and say, hey, so-and-so had a bad weekend. Have they talked to you yet? And they would say, yes. She's already going to come in and get counseling at 2. I go, great. Sometimes they would call me and say, hey, we're really concerned. We think she's got pills. She's not talking to us. Can you come in? Yes. So we work side by side to be able to get this kid the help they needed. So family, friends, at school. How many of you know bosses, coaches? How many of you know there's a lot of people that could be on that list? Okay, a lot. And don't ever stop exhausting that list, because the more people that are in on it, the better chance they have of spotting what's going on, when it's going to happen, or if it does. And then here's one don't ever be afraid to use: 911. How many of you know in the movies, what do the heroes always do? Do they call for help? No, they hop in their fast car and drive as fast as they can and hope they can get there in time. Dumb, dumber, and dumbest. Tell somebody who can get there a lot quicker than you can. Tell somebody who's a trained first responder. Tell somebody who's going to be able to get them into the system to get help, regardless of them having insurance or any resources. 911 works. That one girl we talked about, one night she called me about 2 a.m. She had a plan. She said, hey, I'm drunk. I know when the train comes through town, you cannot get here in time to stop me. She was right. So I wake up my wife, I write her a note. She goes next door, pre-cell phone, goes next door. About 3 minutes later, I hear the Lacey police. That night, Lacey police kept her alive. She moved to Yakima to live with her aunt for a while to see if that was help. Same thing happened. Yakima police, they kept her alive that night. I had another guy call me 2 a.m. in Shelton in a motel. He says, hey, I just want to say thanks for all the help you've tried to give me. It just wasn't enough. I'm calling it quits. I've already slit my wrists. Bye. End of conversation. But we had just enough information to know which hotel it was. Police got there in time. Knocked the door down. He's still alive today. Okay? 911. Again, you got to get good at asking for help when you need it. And you got to get good at asking the right sources. I mean, up until just a few minutes ago, we had a 911 right here. Okay? And I'm sure he can tell you stories. Because that's one thing about this area. This is one of the most frequent responses that the medical teams, the police, is suicide attempts. Suicide attempts and overdoses. And guess what a lot of overdoses are? Suicide attempts. They've given up. Okay? So what we've got here, this is simple enough for all of us, isn't it? Yeah. This is not complicated. This does not require a trained professional. Just takes somebody who cares. Just somebody who will listen. Somebody who will slow down enough to walk right beside somebody and talk to them, get them the help they need, start the process. That's what it takes. So our challenge is on anything new. How many of you know new stuff intimidates us? Yeah, always will. Always does, okay? Yeah, I face new stuff all the time. And I'm always just kind of like, okay, Lord, I don't know how this is going to roll. I don't know how this is going to work out. I don't even necessarily know what I need to do. But I will do what I know to do. I will take that little step that I know is there. I've just learned to do that. Okay, but I'm way down the road, so I totally get it if that's not where you're at this moment. But being able to dive into somebody's world, you will never regret trying to help, regardless of the outcome. You will never regret that. You will always regret watching something pass by. That you'll regret. And that's not like a guilt trip, that's just reality. So you've got a new tool, and here's the cool thing. There's a whole bunch of us in this room. Guess what? They all just heard what you heard. Okay? And here's the cool part. The better you know each other, and I'm not asking for hands on this, but there's suicide survivors in this room. I know there are. This many people, I know there are. There's suicide survivors in this room. There are survivors in this room that have been through horrific wounds. There are survivors in this room that have faced almost every challenge you could put on a piece of paper. There are survivors in here. And how many of you know that's why it's important to know each other well enough? So if somebody says, nobody understands my world, nobody's been through what I've been through. How many of you know that's never true? There's always somebody. And the beauty of it is when it comes from the family of God, no matter what they've been through, they now have a tool that they can use to help somebody. This girl we talked about, horrific backstory. Well, if you know anything about your history, how many of you know Bosnia and Croatia had a really nasty war about almost 20 years ago now? Well, horrific things happened in that war zone. She went there to minister after it was over. And because of what she had been through as a kid, the horrific stuff, she was able to look eye to eye with every woman she ran into that had been through horrific stuff and offer them hope. She could do it with a smile on her face. She goes, oh yeah, I know. I've been there. Oh, you can't possibly know. Oh yeah, I know. And then whatever details she needed to share, she could. But because of what she'd been through, the healing of the wounds, the dealing with the anger and all those issues, she was able to offer hope. So that's the beauty of a tool. It's not just that you know how to use it, but the we factor kicks in. The better we know each other, the more we can give the help individuals need, the more we can be the salt and light for a community, the more we can be a part of reaching into a community and making a difference. So I'm going to pray for a couple things. One, every tool's got a learning curve, and I totally know that. Just don't be afraid to dive in. It's not like you're alone here, okay? This is not a one-on-one session with somebody. There's a whole bunch of you, okay, that have heard what you've heard. Spend some time talking about it. Maybe even somebody you know or something you walked through. You know, make sure you get a handle on this to where you're comfortable with it. Because just like the gal I had the conversation with today, she said, I'm so glad I found somebody who understands. That is so huge. And by being able to talk it in a way where people understand it, it shows that you understand. It shows. So, Father, we just come right now in Jesus' name. And Lord, you have divine appointments for us, just like you had one for me today. Where I got a chance to talk to somebody who, at this moment, has more hope and understanding than they did when they got up today. Just because somebody understood. Somebody could listen. Somebody could talk to them. So, Lord, in this room, in the next 20 years, there will be hundreds of divine appointments. Whether it's at the point of a wound, whether it's at the point of anger, whether it's at the point of actual suicide. Lord, where we can intervene. We can be your hands. We can be your voice. We can be the comforters that you are to us, to them. Because, Father, we've learned things. Your word has given us a light to our feet and a lamp to our path. And your heart for them. Because you loved them so much, you sent your Son for them. As much as you did for us. And so, Father, equip us, encourage us, embolden us when the time comes. But Lord, too, if we are still struggling with some of this stuff, the wounds, the anger, the hopelessness, Lord, I just pray that these seeds of truth, that there's always answers, that the wounds can be dealt with and become scars and just stories, and that we can, at some point in time, deal with conflict and anger the right way. Lord, I just pray for those of us that are challenged in those areas that we'll grab a hold of your hand and let you walk us through it with those around us that can help to that point where we have the health and strength to help others. So for all those things, Father, we just want to say a huge thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.